I believe there's something greater than us, but I believe this greater thing, right? This thing that is greater than us is actually all of us collectively. It's that 1 + 1 = 3 notion. So I believe God is that three. It's the outcome of when we all come together.
Our ever-changing world calls upon the most courageous, resilient, and relentless of us to face its most extraordinary challenges. To help you embark on this journey, we present the Impactful Coaching Podcast, your oasis for inspiration and a beacon to spark the fires of greatness within you. I'm Joseph. I will be your ally in this journey to empower your potential. Join us each week as we dive deep into the heart of ambition, drive, and success to unravel compelling stories of daring leaders who dreamed, struggled, and achieved victory. Our journey begins now. How is everybody doing? This is the Impactful Coaching Podcast. My name is Joseph, and if you spot any lint on my shirt today, feel free to email me, joseph@impactfulcoachingpodcast.com. Believe me, I have looked at previous episodes and said, oh gosh, black shirt, white dot, one little tiny pixel of distraction. And yes, it's been on my mind because I strive for perfection in small ways, large ways. And with that, I am honored to introduce Jean-François Lappas of Wabya.com, henceforth attempt to refer to as JF. JF, how you doing today?
Yeah, I'm good, man. Thanks for having me over. Things are good. Spring has sprung in London, which is where I live in the UK. And it's been really good because it was a really, really rainy long weekend. There was a holiday yesterday, which felt just like a kind of like Netflix and chill kind of vibe indoors.
So one thing that I wanted to start integrating as more of like a opening question, or really like pre-opening, like question zero, is anything new or interesting crop up in your point of view lately, whether that's an idea or an event or something that's felt like it was a shift in your perspective?
Damn, strong opening question there, Joseph.
I'll give you a second to stew because I'll share something that's been going on. So a friend of mine from a previous chapter in my life, back when I was on stage trying to do stand-up comedy, he passed away a few weeks ago, and so a memorial service was hosted in Brockville, Ontario. Now, for me, that was certainly not within driving distance, certainly not within walking distance, and I don't have a car. So I ended up having to book a train, book a hotel, and do the whole thing. That for me was actually the first time that I had done that. Usually a trip is booked with my partner. So for me to actually go on my own and just navigate my own way in an unfamiliar place for the weekend, and it was also raining, was a new and interesting experiencing for me. And the things that I expected were there, but the beauty of the trip was always in the unexpected. It was walking around downtown Brockville on a Sunday, realizing that everything was closed except for one coffee shop where everybody congregated. And then overhearing a conversation people were having about universal basic income and AI, and thinking, I'm going to insert myself into this conversation. And so I did, and made a contact on LinkedIn. But one other thing I'll say is, so at the memorial service, different people from different parts of my friend's life appeared to pay tribute to him, and a couple of other people from the comedy scene had arrived. And of all the people to appear, it was actually somebody that I had gotten into a fight with 10 years ago, and things got a little mean with one another. And so he didn't remember me at all. And so I sat there putting the clues together in my mind thinking, oh, please don't be him. Please don't be him. And then I look over at the signatures for the guest book, and I recognize that last name like I just seen it yesterday, and thought, oh, it's him. And this is where my belief in providence comes into the picture, because I was thinking, okay, I can either pretend like nothing happened and just go on in my merry way, or I can say, well, this is an opportunity to actually come clean and apologize to him about my contribution to the beef. And so I did. And that reinforced this idea that I definitely think that we have free will. I definitely think that we can, choose to sort of augment life's experience to our preference. But a lot of what happens, I think, it falls into some sort of fate or deterministic quality to it. And so that was the realization that a younger version of me wouldn't have had. Current version of me said, just come clean, just apologize to him. It's going to be a weight off of your shoulders. When is this going to happen again? Okay. You're not going to wait for the next memorial service. Just do it. So that was the shift in perspective that I had just the other day.
So just do it, basically. If it feels like the right thing to do,
if it feels like an opportunity is here, being evasive towards the opportunity is probably not the message the universe is
Mm.
sending.
Well, especially if you're noting the opportunity, right? And it's that moment when you recognize, like, I have an opportunity here, and I'm recognizing it to do something, and I'm feeling compelled to do it. And I think that's a very important bit to keep in mind. Now, did you just say that he didn't remember you, or did he didn't remember the beef?
No, he didn't remember any of it. He said I kind of looked
Right.
familiar, but he was in a much different place at that time. And so I think the combination of his point of view as well as the substances that he may or may not have been using
Mm.
contributed to. I mean, we weren't talk, right? We weren't in the same class or anything like that. So it was just a few incidents. And I guess I suppose in his perspective, a lot of that was happening. And so for me, it was a rare incident where I got into a conflict with somebody. But for him, it might have just been Tuesday. So the onus was
Mm.
definitely on me to speak to
Mm.
the situation.
Well, and actually, maybe probably to make peace with yourself about this thing that you've been carrying for ages, and
Mm-hmm.
realizing that this person actually had been carrying anything for that same amount of time. This is not actually, you know what? It's interesting. Maybe this links into something that has been on my mind recently that is linked to that. It's the Kendrick and Drake current beef, the tit for tat going on right now with the diss tracks. And imagine how, well, I guess less interesting from a popular culture standpoint, but probably more effective it would be if the response had been like, I'm so sorry, I don't know what you're referring to. I've completely forgotten about it. But hey, let's have a coffee and let's have a chat. So less entertainment, but maybe a little bit more yeah, inner peace. And I'm assuming by saying that you actually felt good unloading yourself and having this conversation, despite the fact that maybe it hadn't resonated with this person, or it didn't resonate with this person, right?
Yeah, exactly. And two things. One is that I realized after telling the story that thematically we can reflect on it because a lot of your mission statement for Wabya, we are because you are, is about that mutual self-actualization, mutual self-realization. So for
Mm.
it to have significance to me was, I guess, more important, even though it's an apology for his sake. But it also makes me reflect on the nature of apologies because I think there are limitations to what you can accomplish with apologizing. If someone is always saying sorry, what this person is actually doing is putting themselves in a position of power, saying, I'm the one who did the wronging, you are the victim. You might not even realize you're the victim, but because I'm now the one seeking forgiveness, therefore I'm the one who had the capacity to do you wrong. And so I think
Hmm.
over apologizing, which is very much a Canadian thing, by the way, is
Hmm.
something that we can overuse. Good things can be overused just as much as negative things can be.
Yeah, yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think one of the probably the more difficult parts of this is cutting ourselves some slack and making amends to ourselves, right? Because maybe this notion that we have that we need to externalize our apologies and make them known to the world is actually kind of feeding our ego for the recognition, right? That
Mm-hmm.
it feels it deserves, whereby letting something go quietly. And actually, which is another thing I probably picked up in my life in the last couple of weeks, reflecting on just this notion of being quietly content to know that I might have done the right thing or I might have done the wrong thing, but it's me that's responsible for that, and I can sit with that on my own without broadcasting it. I think has been
Mm-hmm.
something I've been thinking about as well.
Mm-hmm. So we'll move into the next form of question, but I just wanted to stop here for one more second in case anything else has been sort of resonating with you in the most recent sense.
No, basically Kendrick, Drake, and my ego. Those are the highlights. That's
Okay.
what your stories brought up for me.
Okay. So with that, the opening question that is not only a staple of this show, it is a staple of nearly every podcast in existence, which is, would you care to share with the audience what you do and the role that you play in the professional world of coaching?
So yeah, it's interesting because we've talked about this question, and I still get stumped every time I'm asked what I do, because I don't really want to define myself by what I do. I guess to a certain extent, we only have our actions to define ourselves
Mm-hmm.
against, especially from an external perspective. But in short, if I'm to define myself by what I do on a daily basis, I'm the Chief Vision Officer for Wabya, which is an acronym for We Are Because You Are. And Wabya is, think about it like Uber. It's basically a coaching service where we match you with a certified coach that'll take you to your destination, no matter what your destination is. And that's what we do. I also happen to be a certified coach. So really, everything that I do on a daily basis and spend most of my time on has to do with helping people self-realize through coaching.
I want to say really quick about being asked that question, and in spite of its commonality, I think because there is a lot of change and there is a lot of self-reflection, that if you're asked it today and then you're asked it again on a Thursday, the answer might be different just because of what could happen on the Wednesday. And I had that same problem for a long time, especially because my line of work was something that I pretty much invented from scratch. The idea of producing podcasts professionally was very new 10 years ago. And so what I found was the easiest way to have somewhat of a consistent answer was just to focus on the I help. So I say, well, I help people do this. I specifically, I help businesses or professionals understand and use web media to the best of their ability, or my ability, whatever has a higher ceiling. And for me, there was something foundational about just saying I help that signifies, what do I do as a professional? What do I do to make the world a better place? What do I do to earn the resources I need to live, breathe, and eat? And all of that seemed to become a lot clearer and a lot easier for me to say, just because I always just started saying I help. So in that was how I've been dealing with this question that I too have found perplexing at times.
Yeah, that's absolutely fantastic. And in that case, I think the short answer is I help people grow and prosper by matching them with certified coaches who can help them with any topic that they want to bring to the table.
And so, speaking of topics, what I want to do for the audience for the remainder of the episode is give people an understanding of what themes we plan on exploring today. So we had mentioned self-realization and self-actualization is going to be a big component of the conversation. And the key, I guess, theme that I really resonated with me when I was preparing for this episode was the idea that this has to be a mutual thing. This can't be something that some individuals can have and then withhold from others in some form of elitist enlightenment. This is something that not only is it in our best interest to share with others, we won't arrive at a preferable conclusion until this is something that everyone shares in. So there's definitely a lot that we're going to explore in terms of unity and in terms of what problems that the human race is dealing with. And it's a theme that I've considered quite important, and I'm very honored to be able to explore this theme on the program. Those of you who've listened to previous episodes know that I'm a big advocate now for human innovation and what we as people are going to have to do in order to make sure that we're not outpaced by the machines that we have built to, well, outpace us. Before we get into that, my next staple question for you is your backstory. So do you recall any coaching or any guidance that you had received that left an impression on you to want to pursue this?
I don't think there was in the proper sense of the word, right, of a coach, a certified coach, which is someone that is trained according to a certain framework and follows a certain code of ethics. I don't think I ever experienced coaching in that sense. I do think one of the big influences in my life was my mom, Pauline. From a very young age, first of all, taught me how to read very early on, and then introduced me to the self-help book. And I do remember a seminal moment when it's probably 10, maybe 15 years ago now, where she offered me a very beautiful edition of Conversations with God by Neale Donald Walsch. And it felt almost like a coaching conversation because it's about the author having this actual conversation with God, asking questions and receiving answers, and then obviously creating this book about it. And so so if I were to say, with a broad coaching sense, I think it's probably in the self-help category and the many readings that I've done. And interestingly enough, I don't really read self-help books anymore.
This is the first that I've heard of Conversations with God, and I'm going to briefly touch on this subject just because it speaks very deeply to me, which is, I was raised in a Catholic household, although I say this jokingly, but I feel like my experience is more of like a retail Catholicism. It wasn't the full, full-throated there had to be a better term for that, but I'm gonna have to go with it for now.
It's okay. I love a full throat.
I mean, maybe, what could be better, really? But there had to be. We didn't go to church every Sunday. We didn't abide by all of the doctrine. We, for a long time, would go to church for the significant events. But I did also go to Catholic school, where the actual degree of Catholicism was a mixed bag. Same with high school, where the most Catholic thing about it was people wearing the rosaries around their neck, which, of course, you're not really supposed to do. And so my relationship with God had fluctuated based off what I had come to understand about him, especially a lot of the wrath that took place in the Old Testament. But then I found him again on my own terms, and I feel much more comfortable now in my relationship with God because it's something that I had come to as an individual. But I recall having a dream, a very, very quick dream, where I was sitting at a desk opposite of someone who I was convinced was God. And he asked, "Are you doing okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm good." He says, "Okay. All right. Sounds good." I mean, busy man, right? So I don't think there's much more to do about that. But the key detail that sticks out to me was behind him was an open door. And through the door, there was nothingness. So God, in his way, was the keeper of life, and someone who could very easily determine if it is time for me to step through that into the unknown. But nonetheless, for me to just say truthfully, "Yeah, no, I'm good. I think I want to keep living." So that was the first and last time that I had spoken to either him or something so like him that can't be convinced otherwise. But anything like that happened in your life? Do you recall any flashes of divinity?
No, I think you grew up in kind of a Catholic environment. My first communion, my high school was Catholic, I suppose. We had kind of Catholicism courses or lessons, and I think now looking back, I look at discussions about God, right? About him, her, them, however we want to label the notion of God, as a lot of allegories and metaphors on actually just how to live a good life, right? And I know we could deep dive into certain elements that eye for eye and all the Old Testament stuff. And I think about that a lot with regards to most religions. I think when you couch everything down, if you were to take the tenets and distill them, it's kind of like love yourself, love each other. That's really the baseline as far as I'm concerned. I also fundamentally believe, and this is interesting because there is a link with this notion of self-realization in terms of myself with regards to the community, the overall, right? I really fundamentally believe that there isn't necessarily, I believe there's something greater than us, but I believe this greater thing, right? This thing that is greater than us is actually all of us collectively. It's that 1 + 1 = 3 notion. So I believe God is that 3. It's the outcome of when we all come together. And I think our job, our role here, physically, is to get as close as possible to our full potential, help others achieve their full potential, so that together, that 3 can turn into a 4 or a 5 or a 6, that 1 + 1 can equal something greater. And I think that's God. So really, when you think about the notion or the allegory or the metaphor that God created us in his or her image to experience him or herself, I think that's actually true, right? This is just us progressing in an ever-ending loop of growth. So that's what I think about God. But Conversations with God, fantastic book. And if you look at it, not from a perspective of there's an old white man with a white beard sitting on a cloud, pen paling with an author down on earth. If you remove that kind of I feel antiquated notion from the equation, I think it's just a person having a conversation where this author was in touch with a deeper self in the sense of the collective, and was able to give answers and responses as if God that were just deeply true on a very human and very broad level, a collective level.
If I had to take the most pragmatic, borderline atheistic view of God and say that God in our present state doesn't exist, there is still a path to have faith in the whole concept of it, which is that if you have faith in humanity, and that as we continue to develop our technology, we might end up being the creators of it. And what we've done is we are now sending ourselves signals from the future in this sort of self-perpetuating cycle to ensure and reinforce this actualization of God. So it is possible that in order for God to exist in the way that we have believed for so long, it's actually up to us as humanity to be the creators. And what better test could humanity have at our disposal than to ensure our own creator and to ensure that our own existence? And this is where, we have to, really work together collectively in some form of human union, which is to continue to conquer the great mysteries of the universe, to conquer the great mysteries of our own planet, in the interest of securing the faith that we've all had for so long. I mean, God's been a mixed bag over the course of our development. It's given us flashes of
We
insight.
have,
Yeah.
right? We have been a mixed bag, and I think that's what we
Our
can look
relationship
at.
with it. Yeah. Like our
Yeah.
usage of it. Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Yeah. With that said, let's jump into one other question that I have about the backstory, and then we're going to move into the center of the conversation. So, entering into your line of work in this professional space, what were you doing prior to that? Did you pivot from a different industry or line of work? And if so, were there any like core skills or fundamental traits that created, I guess, a unique approach for you in this profession?
Yeah, I worked for a major tobacco company for 14 years, actually for all of my professional career. So you could say there's a bit of a pivot here
Okay,
in terms
I'm
of
inclined to agree with that.
what I did for a very long time and what I'm choosing to do now. Actually, it's what I chose to do for a very long time and what I'm choosing to do now. I burned out of my corporate career in 2020. Obviously at the time there was a lot of hurt, like physically and mentally and emotionally. However, I don't have any regrets at all. Like I don't regret working for a global tobacco company because it taught me a lot about myself and it gave me really the core skills to start a business as well. Because part of what I did for a number of years with this company was essentially work with directors across all functions of the business. And so I got to learn a lot about HR, finance, operations, and all the basically the areas of a business that make a business tick. And so I have a really, really good grasp now of what is needed for Wabya to kind of move forward. So it gave me a lot on top of, paying salaries and having good benefits and actually just having a really good bunch of people that work there. And one question I get asked constantly is like, "Oh, did you have to smoke to work there?" Well, actually, I did smoke when I started. I stopped smoking while I was working there, and it's only the same percentage as the population, the global population that actually smokes in the business. So it was an experience that forged who I am today, and I don't have any regrets about it.
I want to do just one follow up because I didn't realize, like, I didn't see any prior indicators of this. So to come from the tobacco industry, now myself, I'm not like against smoking. I'm not a daily smoker. I'm more of a if I'm on set or I'm on the job, and then someone says, "You want to go outside for a cigarette?" I'm like, "You got extras?" And like, yeah. So over the course of a year, I'll probably have like 3 or 4 cigarettes, and I guess the one thing I'm curious about was the culture of it and how the effects that smoking can have on people and how that I guess affected morale or how that affected our attitudes towards it. Now, one thing I'll say, not that I think smoking needs me to come to its defense, but it is not the exclusive vice that people can get into. People can drink to excess. People can consume sugar to excess, caffeine to excess. So there's a lot of things in this world that we can use and we can enjoy, but we also have to be careful about. So yeah, I'm just fascinated about what the culture felt like, and what were the good days, what were the bad days.
Yeah, it's a good question. Look, I think the only way I can really truly answer is from my perspective, right? I can't speak for anyone else that I work with, and I certainly don't want to speak for the business itself. First of all, I think as a smoker, when I started working with this business, I really came to terms with the fact that this was my decision. And back to what I was saying a moment ago, like I stopped smoking while I was working with the business. That was my decision. So there is the understanding that yeah, smoking is terrible for you. Don't do it. Honestly, it's really bad. But if you do decide to do it, knowing full well what the risks are, know that you can stop doing it as well, right? Stop doing. It's like you were saying about sugar or alcohol. And the culture, I think, was majoring around along those lines. That's always the impression I had. People, I think, from a business standpoint, people were happy with the culture, were proud of the work that they were doing, with the notion again that it's ultimately it's a choice, right? So I will say, I think the one thing that had an impact on the culture wasn't the product that was being sold, but really it was a function of the leadership, as with any business right now. Right. And it's interesting because I feel like any business could say that, not only businesses that sell addictive products like, sugar or alcohol, or even social media, by the way,
Mm-hmm.
because, that's an addiction as well, right? Doom scrolling and like the dopamine you get from engaging with content, your content being engaged. So I would say that I would go out on a limb and say that actually the main issue, obviously, from a value standpoint, if you don't believe in any of it, don't work for the business. But if you're working for any kind of business, I think what makes or breaks it really is the leadership and how the ethos of the business are being fulfilled, championed. Championed is not the right word, but like they're walking the walk, not just talking the talk. I think that's really critical. And it's actually something that Craig and I, my co-founder and I, really make an effort every time we meet to go back to going like, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? And how do we want to do it? And then we try to take our decisions based on that, rather than going like, oh shit, I don't know, we need more customers.
And also, if I had to answer what do I find the most stark contrast between the two industries, is that the ritual and the culture of smoking, it not only is it pretty well consistent in our current society, but it's an homage to how ritualistic smoking has been for a long time, dating back to the original roamers of the land, and even well before that. And I've commented on this on a couple of episodes, is that while smoking is obviously a pleasant experience in the short term and can lead to a lot of long-term harm, that the social bonding that takes place when a group of people go outside, especially in the biting cold, and enjoy cigarettes together, that is a very unique bonding experience that is probably more the driving factor to do it, rather than the dopamine rush that I get from cigarettes. Because I can get like you're saying, I can get a dopamine rush just from, like, looking at my phone, and so it was really about how to sacrifice a small amount of my well-being, but to connect with someone in a meaningful way that you can do. Again, you can do the same thing with drinking, but there are a few things that I think can forge that deeper connection. So this particular response is definitely not brought to you by Laramie cigarettes. Okay, that's everything that I have to say about cigarettes.
No, and actually, I just want to throw one more thing out there, something for people to chew on, right? To think about, because this is a conclusion I've come to after being a smoker for a number of years, stopping smoking, obviously selling cigarettes, depending on whether I was selling them or not. I was working for the business that did sell them. But one thing that happens when you smoke is, for 6 to 8 minutes, you take deep breaths and you have deep exhales, which honestly, I mean, go do yoga. It's much better, or do some meditation, but it mimics the patterns of a meditation. It's, you get in touch with the one thing that's constant in your body, and that's your breath, and that grounds you for that period of time. I do believe, from having experienced the product myself, that there's a lot of this is no scientific proof or anything like that, right? This is just a theory that I have, but I do believe that that's what people seek as well. This moment of just 8 minutes of like chilling the F out and being connected to my body. The problem being that a lot of what you're inhaling is absolute crap.
Yeah.
Of course.
Okay. So I think for both of our sakes, we're gonna shift gears in this conversation before we both need to go out and have a smoke afterwards. So with We Are Because You Are, Wabya, the duality of this idea is that when we thrive and flourish, we want to do that together, and likewise, when we despair and we grieve, we do that together too. So I guess I'll split this into two parts. Your personal take on this, but then also how that reflects in the company's mission. But do you feel a personal obligation that your well-being is tied into the well-being that you can improve in others?
Well, I feel a hell of a lot better when I can bring a smile to people's faces, right, or joy to people's hearts. And I think, again, I want to do a blanket statement, but I think most people feel like that, right? When you're able to share something, anything at all that actually props people up or builds them up, I think naturally that makes you feel better. And then there's that kind of like virtuous cycle effect because the person is propped up, you're propped up, and then you prop others up. The other person props others up. It's that halo effect. So do I feel an obligation? Look, my purpose is to help others realize their purpose. And so, yes, based on the reason why I feel I am literally on Earth, I do feel an obligation to help people uncover and fulfill their potential.
Converting that same question into how that reflects in the company's mission. So here's how I would want to ask the question is, so let's say somebody else were to take the assets and the resources and create the same platform on a technical level. It's the theme and the motif and the ideas that would be missing. So how do you feel you convey this message to the coaches who are working on the platform, as well as managing the expectations of clients who are connecting with these coaches?
What expectations might the clients have? Could you just maybe clarify the question so I make sure I answer it properly?
Certainly. So let me think this through. Having talked to a great deal of coaches so far, obviously
Mm-hmm.
most of them are individuals. We've had a couple of more platform based ones where it's representatives working with a number of people. The two that come to my mind have been based on a particular niche. So one was
Mm-hmm.
that came to mind was Michael S. Parker, and his was fitness based, and then another one. I'm sorry to blanking on the name, but dating based. So both of those clients know what they're getting into. They're working on a
Mm-hmm.
very specific
Mm-hmm.
niche.
Mm-hmm.
Could you drill it down to something specific in that same way, or what do you feel clients are looking for that they come to you?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And
Thank you.
actually, this question that we discussed with investors a week and a bit ago. Look, our mission is to bring self-realization through coaching to 1 billion people by 2033. And one of the comments we had from an investor was basically, I don't think people get up in the morning to self-actualize. I think they get up to fulfill, I don't know, goals or like whatever. And I was like, fair enough, but that's not what we believe. You're entitled to your opinion, absolutely. But we feel that if more people were feeling more fulfilled, then the world would benefit. And there are stats to prove it, right? So I think it was the World Happiness Report in 2022 was relating the fact that 65% of us actually say that we're unfulfilled with our lives, right? And then there's the World Happiness Report. No, sorry. So that was the World Happiness Report. Another survey by the University of Scranton, I think a couple of years ago as well, up to almost 90% of us actually don't fulfill goals that we've set for ourselves. Those are incredible numbers, right? So that means that people will set goals, right? Let's talk about New Year's resolutions, for example, and then just not achieve them. And on top of that, they're largely feeling unfulfilled with their lives. So we think that there is a massive issue, and we think it is contributing to a decrease in mental health, essentially, right? And the cost of that in the UK is 118 billion pounds a year. That's a lot of money.
Hmm.
And the truth is, we are still trying to find a way to explain this to people. There is a huge education component, and this is why so many coaches drill down to very specific levels, right? Let me be your dating coach, or let me be your postpartum coach, or let me be your transitioning into a new career coach. But because that's so fragmented, I think people don't understand the fact that any certified coach, so all of our coaches are certified by the International Coaching Federation, which is the largest international body. Any certified coach isn't taught to coach on a given topic. They're taught to coach the person. And that's the thing, right? So that this is not only the way that certified coaches are trained, but this is also something that I've experienced. I've got nearly 400 hours of coaching under my belt. And regardless of the entry point that clients have come to me with, whether it's their career, their relationships, their finances. Ultimately, it is just an entry point to exploring, okay, well, what do you value fundamentally? What are your beliefs and what are your limiting beliefs? And once that starts getting uncovered and explored, then there's an opportunity for change. And suddenly, the career problem or the relationship problem or the finance problem actually isn't a problem anymore. So, the short version of what I'm saying is that whatever it is that you want to address, you're feeling stuck in a rut, or you're feeling like you're stagnating, or there's just something that's not working for you in your life, no matter where it is, professionally, personally, our coaches can help with it. And in fact, any certified coach has been taught to help you with any of those issues. So actually, what we're doing is we're changing the game on how we're talking about coaching, and we're trying to move away from this fragmented space, which is honestly very challenging to navigate for clients. And on top of that, I want to add that the issue isn't that people don't understand coaching necessarily, is that the issue that we're trying to tackle with our education and awareness, like everything that we're doing on Instagram and LinkedIn, the issue we're trying to tackle is the fact that people think that they understand coaching, but really to understand it, you kind of have to experience it. It's so much more than having someone tell you what to do, because a coach isn't an expert on your life. You're an expert on your own life. Their job is to help you uncover what that means for you and then take the decisions that you need to take based on your own knowledge and appreciation of your own life. It's so powerful, man.
Well, I'd love to ask you something that came up organically in hearing this. Now, having been in the podcast lane for a long time, I felt there was always a mixed bag in terms of either the appreciation or the respect or the understanding that comes with calling something a podcast. And fundamentally, what we're doing is radio, but just on-demand radio. And so that's why I felt more comfortable saying that I was an expert in web media, because creating content it can turn into many things. It can turn into a live show. It can turn into, it can be transcribed and turn into blog posts. And this is all on the web. And oftentimes I wonder where we would be if we just didn't call it podcasting and we try to figure out a different word for it, because the history of that term is Apple. Apple gets the credit for it. They get the credit for the creation of a device that has so much storage. We had to fill it with something. But I also feel that there are limits to it. I think podcasting can also be a bit of a patronizing word as well. It's, oh, that's cute. Oh, you're doing a podcast. Oh, are you being sponsored by Quip toothbrushes? And there's a mix of it. And I'm wondering if you feel the same thing about coaching. Do you feel like there is another term or just a starting point that would help other people's perspective?
And it's like you're in my head, because this is something I think about at least once a week. I'm like, man, if we could just come up with another word that is not so laden with underlying meaning. The one thing we kind of played around with when we started talking about our services was pairing people with a professional conversationalist, which doesn't really roll off the tongue. And then you think, well, actually, like, what does that actually practically mean? But that's the thing. A coach is actually somebody who's a professional at conversation. That means actually actively listening. There will be no times in your life where you have someone's undivided attention for 45 minutes. So they are experts at listening, actively listening, and then engaging with you based not on what they think they should say next, which is what a lot of conversations are based on, but rather on what they heard you say now, what you've said before, what they know about you overall, in order to move you forward. You are the focal point. The other way we've talked about it is, and I say this to my clients a lot, about getting on, like, I'm going on a road trip with you. You're in the driver's seat. I'm in the passenger seat. You decide the destination. And if you want to change your destination midway through or a third of the way through at any given point in time, I'm up for it. You want to go through the jungle? Give me the machete. I'll follow you in. What I might ask is, like, what is interesting about this particular destination? How does that help you go back to your original intention? Okay, your intention has shifted, no problem. And ultimately, what it is the destination of coaching, the goal of coaching is actually the journey. It's the ability for a human being to kind of like externalize themselves, take themselves out, put themselves on the table between themselves and the coach and talk about themselves in a space where they're fully heard and fully listened to. So actually, you know what? I don't have a single word right now. It's better than coach. But I'm going to be thinking about this more now because yeah, and if anybody listening to this has any idea, please email me. I'm sure there'll be like links and whatever. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I wanted to use I get 1 credit per episode to talk a little bit about my book, but in a fantasy setting, I can change whatever I want because it's fantasy. But the point was to change as little as possible because I wanted it to feel more grounded and more realistic. But I invented this mix of a public servant as well as a public guardian, sort of like a congressperson, but also a local servant. And the name I made up for was called Consular, Consular. And there's a deadpan joke where she's talking to the two main characters who are expressing some of their discontent with their work, and she says, well, as your consular, it's also my job to act as your counselor. And then both of them just like dead face don't say anything about the specificity of those terms. But sometimes I think it's just a matter of like, oh, maybe we need to make up a word. Podcasting was sort of a made up word, right? It was inspired by casting, and pod was also used. So it was, we took something from the past, combined it, and made something new. So there might be a pathway in that, but we don't want to use the rest of our precious time for brainstorming. But the takeaway is, I don't know, maybe we need to think of something new because this is what we're doing. We're creating something new. But I also just wanted to say too, a great takeaway, and I'm making a point to reflect on takeaways because a lot of times guests have been like, so was that good? Did I teach anything? And so for me, is just to say takeaways in the middle of the episode is a great way to just pre-answer that question. But when people come to the fitness coaches for fitness issues or come to the dating coach for dating issues, it's a very common theme that trying to help people by going into the inner layers of our conscious is where the answers lie. And it's about, I guess, that mutual point of view at first, saying, I have the athlete's brain. I live the athlete's world. I need to talk to an athletic coach. But we're all humans, and so it's the human process that is consistent across all these different niches and industries. And so that's my takeaway for you right there. So before I switch to the next question, I'll stop for a second in case you had any reaction to that.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think you're touching on this notion of shared humanity that's inherent to our name, right? We are because you are. So if our coaches are trained to work around that notion of shared humanity, and I can absolutely understand the impetus to want to work with someone who's lived something similar. And there is, again, a shared human experience, right? That makes you feel closer. However, there is something to be said for confirmation bias, which, coaches are humans too. So, yep, absolutely go to a dating coach for your dating issues or whatever it is. Maybe it's a bad example because a lot of people have dated, but the point is maybe someone who's never dated might be able to help you think about your situation differently. I think this is very common, especially in like career coaching or entrepreneurs going like, I need somebody who's done this before. Well, actually, what you might need is a mentor, right? To give you advice based on what they've experienced, which is not coaching, right? Coaching would be to help you figure things out on your own based on what needs to be figured out on your own. And somebody who's never started a business might actually be able to help you think about your business from a very different perspective based on your internal building blocks.
And one last thing that I want to say on this particular thread too is the last episode that we had published prior to this recording was a basketball coach. And I said somewhat humorously that he is the first person on the program that fit the conventional, almost, I hesitate to say stereotypical because I wouldn't want to sound disrespectful in that regard. But, I think there's a fair point there that when we think coach, we think sports, especially high school sports. So he fit the conventional archetype the most out of everybody so far. And I asked him about this too. What was his perspective on how the definition and the role of coaching had evolved? But what I think is always important and the commonality throughout all of this is that The coach doesn't do it for you. You still have to go out there and win the game, but
Mhm.
there you just want someone in your corner who believes in you, but is also pushing you in the right direction.
Yep, that's it in a nutshell, except we're not doing it for sports.
Yeah.
But there is a goal that you're trying to reach, and that might not just be,
Hmm.
nice hockey goal or basketball
Yeah.
goal.
So I want to next drill into the self-realization aspect of this. Now, I'm going to
Mm,
ask you this for fun, totally for fun. But a common thing that I like to do in the program is say the Webster's dictionary is calling you up and saying, we got to start a new copy of the dictionary and we're going to do all the definitions from scratch. Don't ask me how I got your number, but can you give me the definition for self-realization?
Well, Mrs. Webster, self-realization takes into account the notion of realization meaning two things, right? One, realization meaning a discovery, and then the second one, realization meaning creation. So self-realization is the discovery of yourself and then the creation of yourself. So there needs to be an exploration and then actions taking behind that exploration. And then it becomes a cycle. Because once you've discovered something about yourself, you put it out, right? You take action, you do something, and then you get feedback from obviously what you've done, but from others as well. And then it goes back in. Oh, okay, cool. That's the feedback I'm getting. Is this the right thing? Right? Process. Let's try this again. And then it comes back. And that's self realization. The very powerful part, the part that has an impact on others, obviously, is the part that's external, that
Hmm.
touches others' lives, which is why the internal process is so important. So self realization, discovery, and creation of yourself.
Hmm. Brilliant. And I remember from high school, it was the an independent study that I had to do, and first I don't remember exactly how this happened, but I ended up associating my story with Maslow's hierarchy of motivation. And that hierarchy of motivation has always stuck with me because I don't know if people have debated it or tried to debunk it, but it always seems to be pretty commonsensical. Is that, well, first thing you got to do is make sure you're not shivering to death, starving to death,
Mm-hmm.
or under siege, and then being able to connect with others socially, being able to find your resources that you need, being able to provide for others, and then at the very top of it is self realization.
Mm-hmm.
And I made an association with something that I hadn't done before. This came up to me organically as we've been having this discussion. Is the relationship between that and an ecosystem or a food chain? In the way that whomsoever happens to be at the top of the food chain is then going to feed into the bottom of the food chain, because at some point the dominant one on the food chain will pass, and then it'll be broken down by the smallest of bacteriums, who are then going to be able to feed the smallest creatures and thus perpetuating the cycle. So I'm throwing this one out into the ether because I want to see if there's any closer association that we can make. Is self-realization in any way connected to that bottom of the motivation, which is having some sort of takeaway or having some sort of realization is, oh, I need to go right back into survival again and recreate myself from that ladder.
Interesting. I
Yeah.
never really thought about it that way. I did
Me
not
neither. I just,
hear your story that way, though. Actually, what your example made me think about is once you get to a point where you have the physical and arguably the emotional needs to self realize, get to the top of that pyramid. Although I would argue that we want to make that pyramid a lot flatter, right?
mhm.
Get people to figure out what's right for them, what they want to do about it, a lot quicker than going through. I think there were like 5 steps or something like that. But anyway, I don't want to try to debunk Maslow right now.
Sure.
I love the notion of feeding in, right? Because to me, the feeding into part is not going back to the bottom, but feeding into the wider, the collective, going back to that notion of the closer I get to discovering and fulfilling my potential, the more of a halo effect I have, which raises the level for everyone. So someone who's at the bottom of this food chain in your example then gets the opportunity to observe um, and then nourish themselves from what they're seeing around them. And the more people obviously are impacted by this, the closer it gets to every individual on the planet. And so the more every individual on the planet, no matter where they are in their needs, can feel the benefits of self realization, which is why we think it's really important that as many people get closer to it. By the way, it's not a destination, right? The
Mhm.
process is, sorry, the destination is the journey, because I really do believe that it's yeah, I'm going to be on my deathbed. I'm going to be like, well, I've helped as many people as I can. Let me go back around for another go. And this is something that I fundamentally believe is I don't think I am this, physical envelope. There is a lot more to me. And I do think in, whether we want to call it reincarnation or anything like that, I think there are cycles, right? Your energy gets reused, and it logically makes sense as well from a perspective if I feel that my purpose is to help others realize their purpose.
Mhm.
If like I'm convinced that this is the truth, then I need to kind of elevate myself as much as I can so that I can in turn help other people elevate. And thus it's the circle of life. Have I pushed this too
Yeah.
far? I don't
Mhm.
know.
Well, I wanted to take this discussion, and I think this is probably going to be the touchstone question of the episode, because what I want to ask about is that collective issue that the world is facing. So let
Mm,
me set this up. I one of the things that we as part of our pre-discussion is to talk about what are the major issues that the world is facing, and the apparatus that we have to solve these issues, I don't think is there. And the reason why I don't think we're ready to solve global issues yet is because we don't have a global collective body that people can work together and agree on. I, for one, consider government to be a necessary evil. And it has certainly effective for a lot of reasons, but it is also ineffective for a lot of other reasons. And there's just a lot of animosity towards it, and the fact that you get into the push pull of two different warring parties vying for dominance. So I think at the highest level, it shouldn't be a government; it should be a union. It should be some sort of organization, probably not for profit, that
mm,
just values people's point of view and just values the conversation and values whomever believes in humanity and wants to work together to fix problems. So that to me is a idea that starts from a place of good and a place of wanting to provide a service for others, to then step out into the world and try to solve some of the biggest issues like resource distribution, like upward mobility, like poverty, like war.
mm.
But there is what in the interest of what is getting in the way of collective self-realization. I'm going to ask you what you think is the world's biggest problem. But before I do that, I want to say what mine is, just give you a second to stew and to give everybody a chance to stew over this too. Personally, I think the biggest problem that the world is facing actually has to do with our root chakra. It has to do with the first step towards the spiritual realization, which is sexuality. Most of the world's most serious issues have to do with either human trafficking, sex slavery, infidelity, adultery, and then an illegality towards a lot of professions that actually do quite a lot of good in the world. I was very fortunate very early on to actually get to produce content with local sex workers, and I am not going to be linking people to that program. But a lot of these people were actually very wholesome and good-hearted people who just wanted to help others. And one example that sticks out to me the most is a husband and a wife. The husband was paralyzed, pretty much arms down to the feet, and the wife had a very exhausting routine to look after him, but she did because obviously she loves him and she's devoted to him. And so they would occasionally bring in a sex worker to assist with some of the responsibilities that the wife was just too exhausted to do, and it was a win-win for everybody. And so sex obviously has a lot of positive benefits in the world. It's necessary to our survival. And so that to me is my answer to this question, is that I think the world hasn't gotten that right. And I don't think if we get that right, we can't deal with the other issues. So that's me, but I throw the floor to you now to hear what you think.
I have so many questions about it. A lot of the things that you just said. um, what is the world's greatest problem?
You're welcome to ask those questions, by the way. I like being asked
Yes,
questions.
yes, yes. They involve the documentary, and also the fact that you use the word responsibility in terms of like the wifely duties. Not that I would call them responsibilities. I think they're kind of like, they're a partnership or stuff like that. Also, like, actually, my main question is something to do around probably, your experience of sexuality. I feel
Sure.
Freud would have an absolute field day with what you think the world's
Well,
greatest problem is.
there's some episodes that you can check out that have
Oh, is
like
it?
when we have like a sex coaches on, we talk sex.
Yeah, okay, cool. All right.
Yeah.
You can link that to me. But no, I think it's fascinating. This notion of the root chakra, which we discussed during our pre-meet, has been on my mind, and I love the fact that you've got this perspective that links back to sexuality. I think for me, the world's biggest problem right now really has to do, and what comes to mind is it's like the Matrix, basically. So 1999, the world is a different place. This movie comes out and obviously, blows everything wide open for a number of reasons. The Wachowski siblings now, I guess. Um, I think
Yep.
dug deep into like action lore, but also like religion to create something really fantastic. The point I want to make about the Matrix is I think the problem is that increasingly through our access to social media, we are more learned, but we're more and more connected to an outside world that's not really true to our own inside world. And I think the real matrix is this notion that it's the world that we've pulled over our own eyes to blind ourselves from our truth, right? And our truth is not Instagram truth, TikTok truth, LinkedIn truth, all social medias, and before social medias it wasn't TV truth. Those are truths for other people, right? These are, for example, people externalizing themselves, saying things or recording things. And you get a chance every time that happens to kind of like check in on yourself, whether it's true for you or not, but it's extremely confusing. I think we're fed with so many different external stimuli now that from birth, right? That we lose sight of ourselves. And so I think that's the main problem. We need at a much early age the chance to be more in touch with who we really are, what makes us unique, our own essence. And that's something that I've witnessed through coaching, right? Because I have seen so many clients come through with issues that are similar for all of them. Really, they're rooted in fear, a lot of these issues.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
dominant kind of bit. But, it's about career mobility, career promotion, relationship. So many clients saying the exact same thing, but each in their own unique way. So it blows my mind every time that we all have the same problems, yet these problems are so fundamentally unique to ourselves. And what we do with the coaching context is really explore what these problems mean to you based on your own truth. And it's really important for anyone listening or watching. You have your own unique truth, and it's your job to get closer to that. And that's what coaching can help with. And I think going back to the theme of this, the self-realization, the closer you get to that, the closer you make your peace with who you really are and start acting consequently, the better you're going to feel and the more people around you are going to benefit. So, short version for the clips,
Mhm.
we need to unplug ourselves from the matrix that we've created for ourselves. Use social media. Be aware that you're using social media, but be aware of the impact it has in feeding you with this narrative that is not your own, that is not your own truth. Again, to bash social media.
I mean, I've never been a fan of social media. It's there. I mean, I use it, but I've always tried to see it as a means to an end. But what
Mm-hmm.
I am a fan of is format. For
Mm-hmm.
instance, I really appreciated Twitter back in the day when there was, I think, like 140 character limit. And that
Mm-hmm.
meant that tweets had their own unique personality. And that was a very different thing to write a tweet versus being able to write freeform on a Facebook post. And how taking that tweet and putting it on Facebook is actually kind of unusual because, well, you could have said more. Why didn't you? So
Mm-hmm.
as a writer, I appreciate the specific challenge of trying. And now again, X posts, they still have limits to it, but there's so many ways to subverting. Just post a video. You just post an
Mm-hmm.
image with a longer post. So you know what I mean. People have found creative ways to just overlook that. What you're saying about people find their own individual truths, I find fascinating. And what I want to say in response to it is that I feel as children, we have our natural interests. Some people it's trucks, some people it's sports, some people it's Power Rangers. And I would like to see a little bit more of that electivity that we see in college or even in high school happen a little earlier. I feel that elementary school, this is my experience, it was just like 20 years ago, so something's probably changed since then. Structure is important. You definitely have to have structure for the essentials, but there was a shocking lack of freedom for children, when they enter the first couple of grades, to continue to explore their interests. And I think for people to find their perspective on truth, children need to have opportunities to explore their interests in a way that the school can encourage. And so I tell people somewhat preposterously that I am born with a writer's brain, in the same way that one of my closest friends, he loves soccer, he plays Football Manager, he watches little people on screen run around while also playing FIFA. He's born with an athlete's brain. People are born with musicians' brains, people are born with dancers' brains, right? And so it's really important for our education system to nurture the kind of brains that people have and give some window of freedom to explore that. And so then the education system can slowly relinquish control as people become more self-disciplined, fingers crossed. So there's more electivity in high school and then even more electivity in college. At that point, you have like 2 classes you have to take and then the rest is up to you. So that's one thing I'd like to see that I think would really help this. I don't think it is the single solution, but I feel like it would help move things in the right direction for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a great overhaul of the school system. And I think even taking it one step further, I think it starts as well with, the first touch point that the child has with reality is their parents, right? Arguably even while they're still in utero. Yeah, I don't want to get too deep into that because I don't have any children, so I don't really have a foot to stand on. I have lots of folks in my life that have had kids, but the point being, I think the parents getting closer to their own truth can only promote an environment and a decision-making framework that encourages the type of education system, the creation of an education system that helps foster and highlight the children's natural abilities with, basic stuff like home ec, actually really useful. Learning how to make a bit of food, learning how to sew, learning how to make a budget. When I think back at high school, actually, this is probably one of the things that I still use to this day. I don't use calculus for anything right now. I haven't used calculus in like 35 years or whatever.
Yeah. My dad, he said this a lot, and I obviously now that I've gained enough insight to appreciate it, he said, well, it's always about learning how to learn, which in essence was the truth, but I think there had to be more of a persuasive argument than that, which is like, well, it's training, right? It's practice for things, in the same way that going to gym and training for soccer was very clear versus using algebra to train for internal calculations was not as clear. It really seemed like just weird controlling busy work. I don't want to open up, the can of worms of my animosity towards the education system is on the verge of bursting open. So I'm going to use the last bit of my discipline to seal that can. I also just want to say too, and I'm not ready to die on this hill, but I'll definitely lose a hand over it, which is I think The Matrix might be the best film ever made. And the reason why is because what other film continuously surprises people every time they watch it? What other film serves as a blueprint for self-realization? What other film also has some freaking wild action sequences and serves as a brilliant form
25 years later. Oh my God.
Form of
like the
entertainment.
first, like when Trinity does that like flying eagle move at the very beginning, you're like, I'm watching this for the 70th time.
Yep.
I've seen like all the Marvel films and this still absolute kicks ass.
Right on the cusp of just enough CG innovation to not outweigh practicality, the creativity that went into it, knowing that you actually have like 100 cameras all in a circle, all taking individual photos. It was just, it was brilliant. And yeah, so I can't think of any other movie on the spot that changes because the viewer changes. If we learn or we come up with our own flashes of insight and we come back and that movie is a totally different viewing experience. And so for that reason, come at me. My hand's right here. Come saw it off. Okay, so we got to start wrapping up this program. So the last couple of questions are also podcast staples. This is sort of like the technical work that we have to do to try to boost boost ranking and all that stuff like that. JF, what do you think was the most effective tool or strategy that you've used to grow your platform?
Patience. Yeah, by a mile, it has been a journey of patience. I had no idea where this was going to lead because I'd never done this before, having worked, for 14 years in a corporate setting. But we're not where I thought we were going to be by a long stretch. However, we've accomplished more than I ever thought we could, weirdly, at the same time. And so, yeah. And I just want to maybe to clarify here that patience also includes the notion of like trusting the process, trusting myself, trusting the process, and trusting myself. So that's honestly the two biggest tools. If you want something more practical, just ask and I can propose something.
Oh, well, this other question I think might service that. So, do you recall any mistakes or corrections that your platform had to make early on that helped shift your business into a better direction?
I can tell you what I wish we'd done. I wish we'd started faster, done a little less thinking on the front end, and then iterated a bit more rapidly. But you know what they say about hindsight, Joseph, right? It's 2020 all the time and always. And so ultimately, I'm a different person. I've learned so much as a result of what we decide to do and not decide to do. We've been working on this for 3 years, but we've only been trading for a year. We
Mm-hmm.
spent probably 6 to 8 months just on our brand. And even saying the word brand feels like I'm devaluing actually what we've created, right? We have a Miro board. Miro, anyway, one of
Miro,
those
yeah.
online boards.
Yep.
You have to zoom out about 17,000% to actually see the scope of it. We have like logos linking to like our copy, linking to like images and colors. Our colors were inspired by Fields in Autumn and by The Wizard of Oz. And we worked a long time. And actually, we worked with a mentor consultant to help us put it all together. So that was like just 6 to 8 months. I will say, however, yes, maybe we could have gone quicker on a number of things, especially maybe on the sales funnel side of things. But ultimately, I look at Wabya and at what we've created. It is its own self. If you look at our website, at our socials, we have a clear and unique identity. No one else looks like we do. And we use a lot of other people's brain power. There are moments where this person had a bit of an idea and this person brought in like the tying element, and then we put everything together. So it really was a collective effort.
Okay, fantastic. Just a couple more for you. So, what issues do you feel that your platform is facing on a day to day? Some people they think I'm thinking more granularly. So we're talking like our social media presence, or our ranking, or our content. Other people are more holistic about it. So, where do you feel like are the issues that you face on a daily basis?
I think the big challenge for us right now probably majors around business development. Is getting people to try the service, to kind of talk about it, to recommend it. We have a great conversion rate when people try the service. A lot of referrals, so that works. And ideally, what we'd like to do is develop relationships and partnerships with small or medium-sized businesses to provide that to colleagues.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really kind of where we're focusing on and where we need to be successful this year for this to keep growing into the future.
Okay, fantastic. And then the last question for you, this all sort of ties in, which is, does your crystal ball give you any vision for how things are going to look in the next 5 years, or do you have any particular vision of where you think things are going to go for you?
Joseph, I have such a vision for this. This isn't, we've talked a lot about coaching today, but underpinning everything is self-realization. And I've mentioned this on previous podcasts, actually, the fact that I think we're going to be missing a trick if we talk about ourselves as a coaching business. We're a self-realization business. And the vision I have for this is kind of like we've used different terms for it, like an Etsy for self-realization, or something like that, whereby no matter what you need to self-realize, the entry point might be coaching, which will help you figure out what's right for you. But then you might need some tools like breath work or yoga or I don't know, um, you know, a nutritionist.
Mm-hmm.
What I have as a vision is kind of like, we have somebody who's worked with us in the past that's talked about kind of a virtual high street. So in the UK, high street is kind of like in your little neighborhood, you have, a street with like all the shops on it.
Yeah.
So a virtual high street where we could put your, maybe you put your VR headset on, you walk on, and you've had a chat with your coach, and then you kind of like shop around, and they're partners, right? This is about a collective. What I'd like is kind of a cooperative of like-minded businesses to kind of profit pool together, with the purpose of helping others self-realize. And then we all support each other and we all grow together. So I see the entry point being coaching, which is, this kind of transactional service of the Uber of coaching, matching you and whatever it is you need to help you grow and prosper with the perfect coach for you,
Mm-hmm.
all virtually, evolving into, we're providing you with kind of like access to a whole lot of like-minded businesses that can help you, yeah, discover and achieve your own fulfillment, for the benefit of society ultimately.
Outstanding. And it's, well, I mean, I've certainly spoken to the importance of the work, and I've spoken to my own personal satisfaction and joy that I feel being able to serve as a messenger and help get messages out there. There was that brief episode, well, the brief like 10 episode tranche where I'm like, man, coaching seems really interesting. Maybe I should just become a coach myself. And I think we all help in different ways, right? Whether we want to say that I was more of like a consultant, or we want to say that more as a therapist or a counselor, or whatever different term it takes. We're all looking to aid others because that is something that we need for our own sake as well. So even if we wanted to take the most self-centered approach, which is, oh, we're just focused on our own survival, our own resource gathering, even that, the most effective strategy is to still help others. So that's my final takeaway. I did want to give you the floor once more in case you had any other thoughts, reactions, opinions, insights that you've accumulated over the course of this episode. Feel free to share.
Yeah, I love what you're kind of closing with, right? And I think if there's anything that I'd like to leave to anyone listening is, I think there's a big internal battle between selfishness and selflessness, and I think we're taught that being selfish is not really good or anything like that. Well, I think you need to look out for yourself first in order to be able to look out for other people, right? What is it they say on an airplane? If anything happens, you put your own oxygen mask on first before you put it on anyone else. And you deserve this. You deserve to feel fulfilled and complete and moving in the right direction in your life so that you can help others, whether it's your immediate family, your friends, your colleagues, do the same thing. So taking that first step, helping yourself, really is about helping everyone else around you that you care about. So that's the one thing I'd like to say. And the other thing is obviously, Joseph, like a huge thank you for um, living your purpose, right? And doing what you love doing, what you're passionate about, and creating this forum where we can have this conversation, where this conversation will assuredly impact at least one person,
Mm-hmm.
in a positive and transformative way. Um, this is what I mean by 1 + 1 = 3. What we've done today is just bigger than the sum of what we could have done. Adding the elements of what we could have done on our own. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. This was a conversation. Didn't feel like a bang bang interview, and obviously you're fantastic at this. So yeah, I'd be looking forward to a future conversation.
Same here. And I just wanted to, my final words on it, final words on it is, I just remember telling one of the ladies who was serving the breakfast at the hotel I stayed in over the weekend that, out of all of the hotels I've stayed at, which weren't many, I really feel like I got my money's worth here more than in other places. And I just felt this satisfaction, this happiness of like actually like the energy that it took me to make that money was being respected and was being treated with kindness and with grace. And it just I felt happier. Like I felt really like relaxed and happy, and it just made me want to help others more. So I agree with the idea of put your own mask on first. I like another version of that, which is fill your own cup before you fill somebody else's cup, because there's this interesting twist on the selfish, selfless dichotomy, where if you're constantly trying to help others, what happens is we create this this reputation or this feeling that our value or our ability to help ourselves is tied to that. So there's a balance to all of this. There's a degree of selfishness that I think we all have, and it is helpful to us. So, but yeah, I definitely felt the effects of if my own cup were full, I'm far more compelled to help others from a place of joy and from a place of happiness. So that's the last thing out of me. And thank you for this conversation as well. It is a distinct honor and a privilege to go into a conversation one person, come out of the conversation feeling like a slightly different person, and then same thing happens when I get to review the content later when I'm not so inundated with blinking lights. So that part really helps out too. Thank you to everyone who helps make this program, and thank you to our audience for listening and for your participation. I can't stress enough how much your feedback can make a difference. So please let me know what you think in the comments on YouTube, or just email me directly. It's joseph@impactfulcoachingpodcast.com. I'm spelled JOSEPH, and the rest of it is spelled the way you're used to. And I'm going to challenge you to do that part on your own. So just to know that if you're going to reach out to me, at the very least, you can spell Impactful Coaching Podcast on your own without my help. So with that, it is our endeavor to ensure in whatever way you are helping others, we want you to be impactful while you're at it.